Your cows have to eat, but what they eat could be the difference in what makes your ranch profitable.
You know, I go to these seminars, it's all about inputs. Cow needs grass and water.
Feed costs often consume a big portion of input costs in our ranches, holding many back from being very profitable. And today we'll be visiting with two ranching operations about how they manage with year-around grazing. Yes, that means little to no hay. Vance Mitchell from Loleta, Texas will be on to talk from the southern and wetter climate perspective. And then after that, Cameron and Kellen Smith, brothers that manage their family's ranching operation, Daily Livestock, in northern Wyoming, with their perspective on the colder and snowier climate.
So we're living off the back fat of our cow right now, and her body condition's dropping during the winter, and we're okay with that.
Tune in today to find out about how they are running their ranches without feeding hay on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. We welcome you here to another episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. We're glad to have you joining us here on our program today. If you're listening on the radio, we thank you for tuning in. Hope you can stay with us through the entire show. And if you've downloaded it on your podcast provider, thank you for taking the time to do that. By the way, that is a pretty simple way. If you hear something and you want to go back and listen to it again, all of the pretty much any major podcast and even minor podcast sites that are out there have the Working Ranch Radio Show that you can get to it, or you can go directly to the site at workingranchradio.com. Now, I encourage you, if you hear something today you like, or maybe some comments or questions, something that might come up in your mind, please feel free to let us know. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com, and be sure to click the thumbs up or maybe the thumbs down if you don't like it. We encourage open and honest conversation back and forth, and I think today's show is going to be something that for some folks, I think it's coming at a point in time where, with the hay costs that we have seen soaring so high the last couple of years due to the drought situation, that many folks do look at this, is looking at this hay option that we are feeding our cows. Is there another way around that? And I know there's a lot of traditional elements that are out there when it comes to looking at moving away from feeding livestock through those winter months, and how you can get around that might be knocking on the door of sensitivity. People may not really be open to that, and understand that. But all I ask right now for this week's show, you keep an open ear, keep an open mind with our topic here today, because I think if you're really in a position where you're needing to make some changes in terms of making your ranching operation more profitable, then I think today's show is going to be something you might want to join in today. Vance Mitchell, Mitchell Cattle Company, he and his brother and his mother ranch out of Loleta, Texas. He will be joining us to talk a little bit about how they go on year-round grazing without feeding hay. He's going to represent for those folks that are in the southern and wetter climates. He's going to talk about it from his perspective. And then we're going to have on Cameron and Kellen Smith. They operate their family's ranch in with Daily Livestock out of Gillette, Wyoming. That's in northern Wyoming. And, you know, here's just a little side note, and I'm just going to throw this out there for your consideration, is that both of these ranches are, I believe, about at least five generation families. So if we're looking at keeping sustainability and long-term ranching in your family's ranch, might be something to be considering in this on today's topic. So today, our topic, we're going to be talking with these folks about how they are running their ranching operations without feeding hay. Quick thank you to our sponsors of this segment here today, the American Simmental Association, and we are right in the middle of bull buying season, and one of the largest growth in bull breed types is bulls with Sim genetics. And you know why? Because heterosis works, which is why with Simmental, it's more per head, period. Find out more at simmental.com. Well, as we head to break here, just a reminder, I mentioned this last week, Chimney Rock Cattle Company having their sale. They're out of Concord, Arkansas. That sale's coming up March 28th. They'll be selling 160 head of Brangus and Ultra Black bulls. Also with that, 200 head of commercial females. Now, these cattle, they are bred to be adaptive to multiple environments, resilient to heat, consistent quality, and dose docile disposition. Now, if you want to find out more, you can also get a catalog online. Go to the website at geneplusbrangus.com. Again, that's geneplusbrangus.com. Chimney Rock Cattle Company. Their sale coming up on March 28th. Well, stay with us. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to get into our featured topic, talking with a couple of different ranching families about how they manage their ranches without feeding hay. We'll be back on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this. Starting off in the right direction is essential to gaining an advantage later when you go to market your calves. And I have proof that the right direction is with Sim Angus sired calves. A 2020 study by K-State showed that Sim Angus sired steer calves earn more at sale time than all other breed identified sire groups, with at least 50 lots represented on Superior Livestock's 2020 summer sales. The proof's right there. For low-risk, high-potential calves with earning potential, be confident that Sim Genetics will give you more per head, period. Stand strong, Simmental. And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. As we head into our featured topic, and as we talked about at the top of the program, we are talking on year-round grazing. And I've got a couple different sets of folks joining us here today to talk about it. I felt it was important when we look at this particular topic that we visit with somebody that's doing it more in the northern climate that has to deal with cold, snow, harsher temperatures, as well as somebody that does it in more of the southern climate. And I hope that the information that we talk about today will, if you're kind of somewhere in the middle in there, that there will be some nuggets of information in there that you can pull out if it is something you are considering. But joining us now, I'm pleased to have Mr. Vance Mitchell with Mitchell Cattle Company. He's out of Lolita, Texas, and a sixth-generation family ranch back in 1876. The land you guys are on, Vance, is where you guys started at. I appreciate you joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
No, Justin, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Hope I can answer your questions correctly.
Oh, you bet. And, as you and I were talking before the break, not very often do I interview or even talk to folks that are looking at 6 generations on the family ranch. And you've talked about you've even got kids and grandkids coming up behind. So what a tremendous heritage there.
Yep. One of our primary goals here is to keep it going, because our country's getting pretty ate up with industry and urban civilization, and we hope to keep it going. So that's a goal for my mother, my brother, and I.
You bet. Vance, I want to be able to talk about some of the things you have done as you guys have moved into year-round grazing. But I first think we need to go back a bit and talk about a little bit how you were previous to this, and we can get into how many years you've been doing year-round grazing, some of the things that you've done as you've migrated that direction. But first, give us a little background of maybe what it would have looked like years ago when you were feeding hay.
Well, gosh, back at that time, we'd probably buy 2 or 3 round bales, or at least 2 round bales per cow. Of course, we were calving in January and February and that kind of thing. In changing the production cycle had more to do with it than just going to year-round grazing. My grandfather and my dad, old-time ranches, no fences, just the cows were out. They'd gather them up 2 or 3 times a year, work the calves, strip some calves off, sell some stuff like that, and no really control over production or the grass or the resource, just wide open. We built our first electric fence in 1983 and started dividing stuff up. So we've been almost 40 years doing this. We got more intensive in 92 with a change of the farm program, because we converted some crop acreage into ranch land. About every 10 years, we've increased our paddocks, and we went through a big process about 5 years ago. We're probably up to about 100 paddocks over the whole ranch. We move every day. And doing that process, plus allowing adequate rest or good grazing practice with enough herd effect, enough herd density, and changing our production cycle to more of a summer calving, fall breeding type situation that matches our deer and the wildlife here, has allowed us just to get rid of these kind of inputs and this substitute feeding that we used to do.
Mm-hmm. Vance, I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because when it comes to folks looking at this, and I believe this topic is probably pretty imperative right now when we've seen hay stocks at the lowest numbers across the country that we've seen in years. Many parts of the country have experienced heavy drought. In fact, as you and I were talking before, Central Texas, northern or South Central Plains still in a dry condition, and hay stocks are low. Hay prices are way high. And so from a standpoint of how do we get through this without having, I mean, it's hard to afford $200 ton hay into these cows. So from your standpoint on an enterprise mix, you talked about some production cycles that you all changed up. I want you to go into a little bit more of that, because that really was one of the things you believe is probably pretty critical if somebody is considering this.
Yeah, like I said, we changed our breeding season. We went from a spring breeding, winter calving to a fall breeding, summer calving. That allows us to have calves in the summertime. It allows us to put our bulls out when it gets cooler. Weather has a bigger effect on a semen production than it does on calves. Calf falls out of a cow at 102 degrees and hits the ground at 95 degrees, thinks it's fallen into an incubator. So it doesn't matter, especially if the cattle fit the environment. The key is the cattle have to fit the environment. Mm-hmm. But by doing that, it allows us to go into big grass with these pairs, with these young pairs, and get plenty of feed into them. The cows go through the winter with the calves at their side. The other key to our production deal is we're getting ready to wean now. And so our spring grasses are coming up that are higher quality for these calves. So we'll wean our calves onto this grass and stock them here ourselves at Added and Enterprise. So we're not just cow-calf, but we're also stocker. Mm-hmm. If we get into later spring and it starts to getting dry, we can flip those calves out of here and just hang on to our cows. So we went through a process of determining what we could run on the ranch year in, year out, drought, dry, wet, whatever, and use that number of cows as a static enterprise. Mm-hmm. That's the cows, the herd that we keep here all the time. Everything is extra beyond that, and then we bring our calves in on top of that. If we really get a lot of grass growing and we can see some opportunity, we'll go buy some light heifers and raise heifers. Some that'll go into our herd, some will get sold. But it's a matter of matching the production to the grass is what it is. That's the key, I think.
Yeah, and as you just said that, I was about to ask a question about that because I think that's the key. You're down in Lolita, Texas. South Texas, a very wet climate, and as we begin to move north into different areas, maybe the wetness of that climate can change a little bit, but what you just said there is matching up your production cycle with your grass. So maybe you're in Kansas, you're maybe not as cold as you are up in the northern part of the country, and we're going to hear later on from a ranch up in the northern part of the country about how they handle it as they're dealing with snow. Vance, I want to go now to infrastructure development, because I think in part of this, you have to manage your grass then. I think that's the part that if you're going to year-round graze, we got to have that grass available. You've already changed up your production cycle, but from other infrastructure like water and fencing, talk about what you did there.
Okay. Water is the most important factor. If you don't have water, you can't do anything else. So we planned our water infrastructure where we needed it and how far we wanted cows to have to go away from water. Once the water was planned with adequate volumes, then we started looking at, well, what is our average rest? Okay. And our average rest in this country is about 45 days or less, 35 days in some cases. In some place else where it's drier, maybe 60 or longer. So with our average rest about then, we knew we needed to have at least that many paddocks to have our amount of rest we needed. We have gone in and done all of our internal fences or single wire, hot wire fences, easy to maintain. Cows, once they're trained to it, they don't have a problem with it. They're easy to fix. The wildlife they'll bother them, but it's, again, easy to fix. So about every 10 years, it seems like since 1983, when we built our first fence, we have almost doubled the number of paddocks we've had. And I wish I'd have known it a long time ago. We had Ian Mitchell Ennis, and of course, we went through the Ranching for Profit school. And I wish I'd have started where we are now. Had I known how important rest, stock density, and herd impact had on grass production. We're grass producers. The cows are just a tool to harvest. That's all they are. They're just a tool to harvest, and that's the way we look at them. we look at them as they can walk off this ranch just as fast as they can walk on the ranch as far as selling them. But we have to produce the grass first. So that's what we work with, and that's how it's key. Mm-hmm. But we've fences and water. Anything beyond that better make a lot of good money. So,
okay. Well, that's, I think, what we're going to find when we talk with folks across the country that have migrated into year-round type grazing. Vance Mitchell is my guest today. Mitchell Cattle Company out of Lolita, Texas, a sixth-generation ranch started back on the land they're in back in the 1876, as we said there in the first when we started our conversation with Vance. We're going to continue on with him after this break. We've got a lot more to talk about with him as well as our other guests joining us. The Smith brothers out of northern Campbell County in northern Wyoming will be joining us here to talk about how they deal with it in the northern climate. So stay with us. You're listening to the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Don't keep your cow-calf herd data in a notebook. Keep it in the cloud with Performance Ranch and say so long to decoding handwritten notes. Performance Ranch is an easy-to-use app that simplifies record-keeping and makes decision-making easier. Keep track of herd inventory, monitor health records, and manage costs, all from your iPad or iPhone. Group texting important herd data? Delete it. Use Performance Ranch instead. Go to performancelivestockanalytics.com and be the first to know when Performance Ranch is ready to launch.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Joining me is Vance Mitchell with Mitchell Cattle Company out of Lolita, Texas. And we're talking on year-round grazing. And I'm going to have Vance is joining us here. And then coming up later in our program, we're going to have Cameron and Kellen Smith out of northern Wyoming to talk with us on more of the northern climate. But Vance, as we kind of wrap up my conversation with you here today on this, you've hit some really great points from a very fundamental standpoint people need to be considering if they're going to look at year-round grazing. But what I want to know is, you used to feed hay. What was the thing you said, we got to do something different?
Money.
Okay.
Profit. And time. I don't think people realize how much cost there truly is in feeding hay. I mean, it never made much sense to me. I got a ranch management degree from A&M, and all of our planning was around inputs and maximum output.
Yeah.
We make more money with smaller calves than we ever have. It just didn't, because we're not pouring the money into it, both with substitute feed, supplement feed. All the money's walking to town. We need to find a way to keep it on the ranch, So, I go to these seminars. It's all about inputs. Cow needs grass and water. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, we're finite, so we need some mineral. And it just drove me crazy that we couldn't do it simpler and with less effort. So I went to the Ranching for Profit school back in the late 80s. My whole family's been. Stan Parsons is about the smartest man I've ever met. And bless his heart, he's passed away, but we wouldn't have this place if it wasn't for him. And he turned us into this profit conscious, look at cost, look at the overheads. I mean, putting a bale of hay out is pretty simple. But you got to pick it up. You got to take it to a barn. You got to turn around and take it back out to the cows, and all the things that go with it. If you're baling your own hay, you've got a rake, you've got a baler. Cows are supposed to harvest their own food. My grandfather had a saying: "We don't feed cows; cows feed us." Mm-hmm. And I thought that was pretty key. Well, I get thinking about him, and my brother will tell people that all the time. We don't feed cows; cows feed us. Actually, what feeds us is the grass we grow. And the better use we can make of that grass at a pointed period of time. There's only two kind of animals in nature that have when they're young in the winter: bears and squirrels. Everything else does it when there's more grass. Everything else does it. Elk, deer, caribou, everything does it when there's grass on the ground. Why we force them to do it in the middle of a snowstorm or middle of a wet winter, I have no idea. So profit, that's the main driver here. Mm-hmm. Making some more money, making it easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you and I were talking at the break, we were talking about, are we getting everything covered here on this topic? And you've done a phenomenal job of being very concise and to the point on some really important parts that I think people really need to consider. And so as we close this up, Vance, real quick, if you were sitting across the table from somebody and you had to give them 3 to 4 things or 2 or 3, 4 things and say, okay, you're wanting to consider year-round grazing, here's a list of things they should consider.
Sure. Evaluate your property, your resources. determine what your true stocking rate is. Okay. Once you determine your true stocking rate, analyze your country so that you can fence it correctly and give adequate amount of rest. Rest, rest, rest. That's the key to growing more grass. Even if you're feeding hay, you're still grazing. The cows aren't just eating hay, they're out grazing, but rest. And then once you determine your rest period, get your fences built. The cattle are so easy to move between paddocks. There's nothing to it. We move close to 700 head every morning. Takes us all of about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't take anything. Analyze where your production is. If your production cycle doesn't match nature to make more use of your grass when it's coming, reevaluate your production cycle so you can match the grass, which will help you not have to worry about this hay and do the year-round grazing. And it can be cows, it can be stockers, it can be whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, some good advice there. And in Vance, I think one of the things too for folks, and I'm going to be honest with you myself, as I've migrated away, I think it scares people to move this direction.
It shouldn't. I mean, there are too many people doing it now. Reach out, find somebody that's doing, go watch them. Go see what they're doing. Look at the possibilities. You know, if you're not hauling money to the feed store or the hay guy, that's much more money you're talking at. Find a group of people that you can consort with and get like-minded with. And there are people in every part of the country and every state that are doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. The Extension Service and the universities are finally looking at this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's being done. It's being done successfully. Just find those folks and go visit with them, and they'll be happy to share it with you. I'll be happy to share with anybody what we do.
You bet. Well, Vance, I'll tell you what, and I will make sure I put contact information to you for folks that want to follow up and maybe want to visit with you about it. Even if folks are in a northern climate, I still think it'd be valuable to visit with anybody that's doing it. Now, there's and you've had some great advice too that I think is adaptable no matter what. Whether you're on the Canadian border up into Canada all the way down to where you're at, which is about as far south as you can get. So with that, I sure appreciate it. I think you've had some really good sound advice and ways for folks to follow up. So Vance, I appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I want to say thanks to my brother and my mother for helping me along through this. We work as a team. The families come all the way through, and the kids and the grandkids are coming along. So, if you keep more money, you get to keep the ranch longer.
Yep, absolutely. 6 generations.
All right, Justin.
You bet. Thanks, Vance.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
Well, now we're going to pivot. We're going to migrate north up into northern Wyoming, and more specifically northern Campbell County, as we visit with a couple brothers that are on their family's ranching operation. Cameron Smith and Kellen Smith there in northern Campbell County on Daily Livestock, which has been in their family for, oh my word, about 125 years, guys, if I'm not mistaken on that. So I appreciate you joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, I want to, we'll get a little bit of a background about your ranching operation. And I felt it was interesting. I know when I was visiting Kellen with you and then Cameron before we started on air here a little bit, it's interesting with your guys' operation because so many ranches across the country were very traditional in the fact that they did feed a lot of hay in their ranching operations. However, your heritage is not so much. And Cameron, I'll go with you first. And that's something that's a little bit different than a lot of folks because it's about 125 years that the Daily Livestock's been in existence in that part of the country. And really, you guys come from a background of never feeding hay.
Yeah. Grandpa never fed hay. We don't own a tractor. We don't own a baler. It's really all we know. And so we are primarily a cow-calf. I mean, exclusively cow-calf enterprise right now. Cows are out on pasture right now. Made it through that snowstorm last week, and everyone's doing fine. So
yeah. Kellen, I know when I talked to you a little bit about the same thing, you kind of had the same answer in the fact that, it's something that we never did. And so the first thing I think folks are thinking about, and Cameron, you talked about a little bit, you made it through that pretty bad winter storm that hit much of the northern part of the country a week or so ago. And so Kellen, from your experience, I know both you and Cameron went down to the University of Wyoming. You have your degrees, you come back to the ranch, but in your time frame of growing up and up until now, we've had some pretty massive snowstorms. And I know in the back of folks' mind, they're like, how do they get through that? How have you gotten through those things?
Yeah, like Cameron said, our grandpa Jim Daly, he just never did. So growing up, our dad run the ranch, and so we were out here with him, and they fed some cake, and we still did to our heifers coming back. But I've never seen an event that where we lost a substantial amount of cattle due to weather. The last major storm that killed cattle out here, so our dad tells us, would have been the winter of '83, and so they're out on pasture. We've made some changes since we both got out of school and trying to capture the growing season a lot more. But when it comes to winter, we're just watching body condition and moving accordingly, and terrain, of course, to make sure they got some cover for storms like last week where negative temperatures and 30-mile-an-hour winds and foot of snow.
Yeah. Real quick, and Cameron, I'll go back to you on this. When it comes to the enterprise, as you say, you're mainly a cow-calf operation right now. Was it ever any different before? And as you are looking in your process of your enterprise mix now, how do you feel important it is to have the right enterprise mix when you're looking at year-round grazing, and how does that affect that?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And I mean, like everyone else's ranch up here, 100 years ago, we started on sheep. And Kel and I have looked at bringing sheep back. We tried some sheep a couple of years ago, custom grazing for another guy, and it worked pretty good. And I think, yeah, our terrain is what I think allows us to winter graze. I mean, the wind blew off a lot of bare spots, so cattle are up on hills right now when it's sunny out grazing. Now, I don't know if our enterprise mix would work if we didn't have the terrain that we have.
Yeah.
And I think that would be important.
Yeah. Kellen, I'll go back to you as Cameron's talking about terrain. And I know that's where you guys have always been. It's very open, very flat, open country north of Gillette in northern Campbell County. It's just for folks that aren't aware of that area. But I know you're not far from folks that ranch in different areas. I mean, you kind of sit between the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming and the Black Hills of South Dakota. So I know you have friends and other folks and other ranchers that ranch in those particular areas. How important do you think it is to also understand your enterprise mix with the type of terrain as Cameron was mentioning?
I think it's very important going to different continuing education deals with Cameron and our hired man. One thing that sticks out to me, we went to a Jim Garish course for a couple of days, and one thing he preached is it's always easier to change your livestock than your forage base. And like you said, between the Bighorns and the Black Hills here, you can drive 20 miles from my house and be in totally different terrain, trees, pine trees. And then you go to the west and it's primarily very steep sand banks, cedar trees. So we have a vast country here of creek bottoms, rolling hills, steep draws, and our cattle do really well here, and they always have, it seems to be, on taking care of themselves.
I think that's exactly right. Like, we raise our replacements here. Our cows know what's here. They just make it work for themselves. And
That's a good point. Cameron, I want to go back to that just a little bit, because even in my own experience here, and I know you guys and myself, we've kind of went through some similar training in terms of looking at really penciling out whether or not to raise your replacements or not. And you hit on something that I guess in my years of experience back here, we're starting back into doing that a little bit more, mainly because of the fact that I feel like our replacements might do a little bit better job of understanding the terrain, the land, the what we're going to need out of them in terms of grazing. Is that been something you guys have always done, is raise your replacements and found value in that versus buying them?
Yes. And so we've all been to the school, and they preach probably that cow-calf enterprise, maybe you should look at it, buying replacements, but there's that huge institutional knowledge of those moms teaching those calves what to eat, and it's been successful for us. So
yeah.
And I don't know, we have brought in some outside cattle before, and they seem to fall out faster than home raised stuff.
Yeah, that's actually been my experience too. My guest today, Kellen Smith. They're with Daily Livestock out of northern Campbell County in northern Wyoming, and we're talking year-round grazing. It's been a part of their family ranch. That ranch has been in the family for about 125 years. So, and it's something that they've always done. So it's a little bit different perspective. When we come back, we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about infrastructure development, because I know that's something that they have had to and are currently working on now to increase turnover, increase the scope of what they're able to run on their ranching operation. We'll be back with more on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this. Cattle producers, here's a way to put more dollars in your pocket. Put the Amifirm Advantage found in all Gain Smart mineral to work in your cow herd. Amifirm is the industry leader in increasing fiber digestion. In fact, research shows putting Amifirm to work increases forage utilization by 10%, reducing overall forage costs and allowing you to graze more animals per acre. That's a big-time return on your investment. To find which Gain Smart mineral formula is right for your herd, visit gainsmart.com. And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Our topic here today we are talking on is year-round grazing, and we're having the opportunity to visit with folks in a couple different parts of the country. Our guest joining us here in this segment, as it was when we closed out here, the last segment is Cameron and Kellen Smith, as they ranch in northern Campbell County, northern Wyoming. Daily Livestock is their family's ranch. It's been in their family for coming on about 125 years, give or take, in there, and a lot of great family history with their particular family and how that got up and going, and that would be its own show in itself. Guys, I really enjoy reading about your guys' family history and that, but today we're talking year-round grazing, and it was something, ironically, that's something your grandpa did, and you continued to carry that on. But the one thing you did realize, though, is infrastructure needed a lot of help. And while Grandpa had put in a lot of infrastructure, things have changed a little bit in that. And so, Cameron, I'll go back to you real quick here on that infrastructure development. Give a little bit about what you had and what you're looking at.
Yeah, so in the late 70s, Grandpa and my dad, as my dad came back, put in miles of 1.25 inch or smaller PVC, and that's what we've been sustaining on for years now. And as Kellen and I come back and change a few management styles and tweak the grazing, we realized that wasn't enough. And so we've been trying to put in some 2-inch and some bigger lines. And we bought frac tanks out of the oil field and gravity feeding from those, and those are working great, actually. So
So water development was a big part. Let's get to another thing. We might circle back to water real quick. Kellen, I want to go to you, because one of the things, as we've had talked about previously, was it's a large ranch. There were a lot of very, very large pastures, and now that you have some water development, now you're beginning to break up those pastures a little bit, and I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I don't know, what year did we go to Ranch for Profit, Cameron?
17.
We came out of there and stuck our heads together and started thinking of ways to do better out here. And since then, we've run, I don't even know how many miles, 30 miles of 2-strand high tensile hot wire, and just trying to break our biggest pastures off first. There's a lot of places we would like to get smaller. Just as of right now, we're breaking the biggest ones, and it's made a heck of a change on our cattle behavior, our own relationships, and the number one thing we've run into is water, and we knew that, although it becomes more apparent when it's 100 degrees August 1st and you're trying to go into smaller pastures than previously. So that's where we're at right now. We're still doing some fencing each year and mainly water infrastructure to beef these up to handle substantial stocking densities during the growing season in the summer.
Guys, I want to ask this question, because one of the things about year-round grazing that people have questions, it's really not about the spring, summer, or fall months, but it's about the winter months and getting through those winter months? Now, in our part of the country, we typically can be dealing with some snow cover. So how have you managed that when folks say, well, how are you doing this? And what about these cold mornings that are 22 below and we've got 8 to 10 inches or 12 inches on the ground? And I'm not sure who to go to this question with, and you both can answer it if you want to, but how have you handled that? Because when we talk year-round grazing, I think the real question is the winter months.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it first. So we're living off the back fat of our cow right now, and her body condition's dropping during the winter, and we're okay with that. We don't calve till May, so they're really pretty easy keepers right now. We had a foot of snow last week, a little more than a foot of snow. Cows are out there, they're grazing through it. We'll find spots that are bared off. She'll start picking back up real fast as soon as that grass greens up.
So Kellen, real quick, is your numbers that you're able to keep, is it less because you're year-round grazing, or have you been able to increase your amount of numbers since maybe when your grandpa was running it?
It's less as of right now, mainly due to some extreme droughts. What was it, 2020 and 21? We destocked, and so our goal is to continue to keep building our herd. But it's really our winter grazing, we've changed substantially from the way Grandpa did it, in the sense that he would just go pretty much to the same big pasture every year, and those cows would be there until branding. And granted, they used to calve in March, and Cameron and I changed that a while back, but now we're hitting different spots of the ranch all different times a year. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to be able to chase that grass elsewhere and be different locations throughout the year, and watching those cows go after different species of grass and locations, like Cameron said right now with that storm. It's very interesting to watch those cows graze on top of hilltops that you never see cows on. So yeah, they know better than us what they want, and they go after it.
Mm-hmm. So
Jesse, can I add something to that?
You bet, Cameron.
Since Kellen and I have changed this, the one thing we have noticed, and we've moved our calving dates back, we calve 100% on pasture now. Mm-hmm. When Grandpa's and Dad was calving in March, I mean, we used to bring them into the barns and calve them out, night calve them and everything. And
just the heifers.
Mm-hmm. And now we're 100% on pasture, and we're still not feeding hay. So nothing's changed that way. Our numbers necessarily haven't increased yet. I think we'll get there. Mm-hmm. But that's the one big management change that we have noticed, that we're able to calve 100% on pasture, no problem.
Mm-hmm. So let me get some specifics from you here real quick, because I know folks are going to, what do you think's average weight of your cow or your cows?
Now?
Yeah.
1,200.
What were they back when Grandpa was running it?
Well, Dad and Grandpa used to send everything to the feedlot, so They were probably 1,400. No, they were 1,400 plus. Mm-hmm.
So on your calves you're weaning off, do you have some percentages or numbers like that kind of give you some benchmarks to go off of?
Yeah, we're still weaning at 200 days of 525 pound calf.
Okay.
So we're just weaning a month or two later than we used to.
Sure. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining us. Before we head out real quick, I'll just maybe some final comments, because I know, first of all, it's a little unique in the fact that this is something that your family's ranch has never really adapted or done in terms of feeding hay. So you've always had that mindset of we're going to year-round graze. However, if you could just in a quick few phrases, what would be some helpful advice you'd offer to folks? And Kellen, I'll go with you first.
Mine, I guess, is breaking the paradigm of why Grandpa or Dad or whoever did it that way, and really questioning yourself on what you're doing, if it's worth it or not. And that was the biggest takeaway from all this new management way of thinking for us, or for me personally, was the paradigms. I was stuck in the rut of always thinking it had to be done this way, and it's given us the freedom after I broke that paradigm to really think outside the box and try some new things and not be worried to try new things. Mm-hmm. So,
Cameron, your thoughts? If you were just sitting across from somebody at the table and you had about 3 minutes of their ear and they were asking about this, what would be some key points you'd advise them towards on year-round grazing?
Try it. Watch the body condition score. you can always go back to feeding. I'm a big Chip Hines fan. Read his books, Time to Change. If one can do it, they all should be able to do it. That's kind of my motto. I mean, reading those books, that is Grandpa's management style. So that's why we stopped feeding supplement to the heifers. One can do it, they all should be able to do it.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining us here on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for having us, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
And again, that was Cameron and Kellen Smith. They are brothers that manage and operate daily livestock in northern Campbell County. And I will put in our podcast description contact information or links that you can click on to get contact information for both Cameron and Kellen, as well as for Vance Mitchell as well, that joined us earlier on in the show. And so you can visit with them. Please feel free to reach out to them, as well as they welcome anybody to call them. And like Vance was saying too, if this is something that you may be considering, there is probably somebody that's not too far from you that you can go and bend their ear just a little bit to look at how they're doing it and see how it can work in your operation. I think some high points that I would really point out in all of this was the fact that there was a lot of infrastructure development, and there was a lot of rethinking and remanagement, even for the daily livestock. They moved their calving back into a May calving, so there was some management techniques and management strategies that they put into place. Vance mentioned that as well, that moving some of their calving around to help with that reliance on hay a bit, get away from that, I should say. And those are some things that, really go back and listen to some of those key points that both Vance and Cameron and Kellen talked about. Now, just something I want to throw out here for a number for consideration. And I don't say that you have to be hitting this. I'm just going to throw this out there to see where you're at on a scale in your operation. They say that there's a benchmark number that your feed costs should be less than 16% of your gross product. So let's just say, for example, you have 100 head of cows, you sell about 95 head of calves, and you have about, let's just round it to $100,000 in gross product. Are you spending on those 100 cows $16,000 or less in feed costs? And if you are, then you would be considered in the upper tier of some of the very ranches that are benchmarking on a very profitable rate. And I think that was something that Vance talked about, was part of the reason that they moved this direction was from a profitability standpoint. And I know in talking with Cameron and Kellen, they said, Mandy, you get a lot of pushback from any of your topics on your show, because we feel there's going to be pushback on this. Any discussion that they've had with folks about moving to year-round type grazing, that, some folks would say, well, you're hard on your livestock by doing that. And I guess I would throw this out, and that was part of the reason I asked this number to Cameron and Kellen, is what's the weight of their cows, and what's the weaning weight, or the weight on their calves that they're selling. And you can't tell me that you have an unhealthy cow if you think you're being hard on your livestock. An unhealthy cow is not going to wean off a 525-pound calf at 200 days of weaning. That's just not possible. So as we head to break here, I guess just one final thought here in this, and the captain and I were talking a little bit about this subject, and knowing that, our conversation today with these two ranches, it's not neither to condemn or condone everybody else's ranching operations, how they do or don't do things. It's their opinion. It's what we're hearing from them. And I encourage you, if you have some concerns or you have some comments, you agree or disagree, let us know. We want to hear from you about this, as well as it'll help us to go down the road that we feel will provide useful information to you all as the ranching industry that's out there doing it each and every day. And we know that when it comes to these decisions, there's risks that you have to be fully aware of when you make management decisions. And I encourage you to do that for your own self. And I hope, if anything, our conversations and our topic here today is something that will cause folks to just step back a little bit and evaluate your own operations and make decisions accordingly. Well, stay with us. When we come back, Kellen Smith is going to join us back again as to talk a little bit about his music career, and we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. We'll be back on the Working Ranch Radio Show after this.
Set up the next generation for a productive lifetime with Zinpro Avela 4. Achieve productive success in your cows with 20% increased conception rate and a 16-day tighter calving interval. Calves from cows supplemented with Zinpro hit the ground running with improved immunity and 28 more pounds at weaning. Allow your cows and calves to perform to their full potential with Zinpro Avela 4.
Now this cheatgrass and clover is all taking over like a curse on the plains. never get back only this time. Seems so real. As an unfair disturbance of blankets and rains took your last down, caused all this pain only this time. Seems so real.
And we welcome you back here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. Yeah, that's a little bit different intro music than we normally do. And that song is entitled Cheatgrass and Clover. And here to join me on the program is the singer and writer of that music, Kellen Smith, who was in our previous segment as well, as we were talking with he and his brother Cameron on their ranching operation, Daily Livestock, on year-round grazing. And I want to get Kellen to hold back here a little bit and talk a little bit about your music career, Kellen, because I know in the last couple of years things have kind of started to evolve a little bit more for you. You've been playing music for quite a bit, but I always find your music a little interesting here because it does kind of reach back to some of the heritage that I feel that you have in your ranching heritage as well. And so my question is a lot of this music that you're singing, is this stuff that you've written?
Yeah, as of now, I have 2 albums out. I just recorded a third in January, and I write all my own songs, and it's gotten a lot more serious the last couple years than back when I was in college. So This is the first year I've really got out of Wyoming, I guess, to play music, and we'll see what happens here. I'm still tiptoeing into it. I'm not just going gung-ho, but it's been a good time, and I got quite a lineup this year, 2023, so I look forward to playing some music in some different places, and I'll be releasing a new album this summer. Working on that with my guys down in Texas right now over the phone, so it's sounding pretty good. I look forward for everyone to hear it.
So real quick, what's I know you said you've released a couple albums. What's the biggest song right now that's had the most response from folks listening?
It's called Pine Box Jim. It's on my second album, Rancher Blues, and you can listen to it on all streaming platforms. And I know the video's on your website, right? KellenSmithMusic.com is your website? Yeah, we shot a music video for that and for Cheatgrass and Clover.
And so, as we said, KellenSmithMusic.com is the website, and you said they can also download it on all the different platforms as well?
Yep, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, Napster, LimeWire.
All right.
Anywhere you stream your music, it should be on there.
All right. Well, when we go out of break here, we will. I'm going to play one of them as we go out of break here, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Kellen, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you, Justin.
And again, that was Kellen Smith. I encourage you to go out and check his music out if you like for yourself. KellenSmithMusic.com. Kellen is spelled with an E on both ends there, and you can find more about his music there. And also, as he said, you can find it on a lot of the different streaming platforms as well. I know there's a lot of good musicians out there, and I not necessarily give preferential treatment over one than the other, but I did have Kellen on the phone here to talk a little bit about their ranching operation in regards to our featured topic here today. So I thought it'd be good to just pull him to the side and talk a little bit about his music as well. I encourage you to check it out. Well, let's turn now to what we normally have in this segment as we take a look at our long-term weather today, brought to you by Indovac Beef. Indovac offering protection against Pasteurella, Manhemia, E. coli, and Salmonella. It is paired with an immunostimulant called Immune Plus that boosts the animal's overall immune system. For more information, visit IndovacBeef.com, or you can contact your local Indovac representative today. And joining us now with that look at our long-term weather is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, we were joking here a little bit before we went on air a bit about March, at least for us here where I'm at, kind of came in like a lamb, but that may not be the case for certain parts of the country. And I feel like this weather, and as it much is, it's kind of a wave pattern. And we've got a few nice days, and then we got some winter. And you say March has 31 days, and we're going to have a lot of winter still.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the winter we packed in for a lot of folks in the 28 days of February. That's for sure. I mean, it really depends on where you are. I mean, there are some people who are so tired of winter, and then there's some people who said we haven't had winter, and then we have a lot of people who are somewhere in between, because it really has been a winter where it depends on what region you're in. In terms of how the winter has gone for you. I mean, if you live in the mountains of California, you are begging for the snow to stop. People are begging me in Arizona for the snow to stop. I mean, I was getting videos of snow in North Tucson last night. And then you got people in the Southeast who are in the 80-degree ranges over the last couple of weeks or so. So it's been a wide variety, but we all know that March is a roller coaster month. Mm-hmm. You can have some pretty wild swings. And I think for a lot of the country in the month of March, there's going to be these swings. Mm-hmm. And these swings are going to bring a wide variety of weather. I think there's plenty of opportunity for folks who haven't seen a lot of snow to see some, and folks who are tired of the snow, you're going to get more.
Well, it is March, and as we've said before, the cooler weather usually brings moisture, and as droughty as a lot of folks have been over the last couple of years, we just kind of have to take the tail with the hide on this deal.
Well, exactly. And we talked last week about, will the Southern Plains get into the action? Well, I do think that's going to be part of the equation as well. The later we get into March and into April, I mean, we did see a little bit early this week in the Southern Plains, but it's been the eastern areas of the Southern Plains that have been getting wet. But when you start to get rid of a drought, if you were to look at how droughts end, they first of all break apart into islands, and then you tend to see the last vestiges of drought hold on strongly in one particular area before finally fading away. And it looks like that'll be the Southern Plains. I mean, the most recent drought monitor shows big improvements in many parts of the Intermountain West over the last couple of weeks. But we've still got Kansas and Oklahoma and the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles areas and parts of Nebraska still, and Northwest Iowa that kind of seem to be always kind of the bridesmaid and not the bride, but I do think over time, as we go deeper into spring, those areas will start to get into the action.
All right. Well, Don, appreciate you joining us here today with a look at our long-term weather.
Thanks, sir.
Again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. His website can be found at dayweather.com, and from there you can also find a link to his daily video podcast that he kicks out every Monday through Friday morning. Our weather today brought to you by Indovac Beef. Now, if you're looking to improve your herd health and your bottom line, Indovac Beef is the vaccine you're looking for. Indovac offers protection against Pasteurella, Manhemia, E. coli, and Salmonella. To find out more, go to the website at indovacbeef.com or contact your local Indovac representative today. Well, stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about what's in store for next week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And as we head into break, we're going to play out a little bit more of Kellen Smith's music, this one entitled Pine Box Jim. Take a listen. We'll be back after this.
Jim lives in the pines of eastern Alabama, makes a living building caskets for the dead men. Who's up next? Whose last breath? Nobody knows. All that's known is where all Jim's caskets go. And each plain stroke and each stain soaked, Jim takes his time, knowing.
Do you have a young child, grandchild, niece, or nephew that loves the weather and wants to learn more? Day Weather has produced a children's weather journal full of weather facts, fun weather experiments, coloring pages, and pages to record weather observations for every season of the year. The weather journal is for ages 3 to 7 and designed to be fun and educational. The interactive weather projects are fun for the whole family to take part in. For only $10, the Day Weather Journal is a great gift idea for any occasion. Click on our Amazon link to order at dayweather.com.
Well, coming up on next week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show, we're going to continue down this road of year-round grazing, and author, speaker, and consultant Jim Garish will be joining us. He wrote the book Kick the Hay Habit, so he will be our guest next week. A quick thank you to our guests this week, Vance Mitchell with Mitchell Cattle Company out of Lolita, Texas. Also, brothers Cameron and Kellen Smith out of Daily Livestock in northern Wyoming. And just a quick also mention here, KellenSmithMusic.com is where you can go and find some of that music that we played here today as well. Thank you to the American Simmental Association. Heterosis Works, which is why with Simmental, it's more per head, period. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you like the program today, let us know. Give us an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.